All right, this is a very, very important video. This video is documenting this prediction that is derived from God's big picture of prophetic signs, which is only being explained on this channel. That the US stock market indexes, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 stock market index, will make their peaks since the lows made in October of 2022, and then begin their biggest crash in all of history on July 3rd, 2023. So, to repeat that, to explain that more clearly, the stock market indexes made their all-time peaks on January 5th, 2022, and then from there declined and made their lows last October in 2022. And since October 2022, they have been steadily climbing, and now it is predicted that they will peak in a secondary peak, not the all-time peak, but a secondary peak from their lows in October on July 3rd. And from this peak, the stock market will begin a decline that will ultimately be the biggest crash in history. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. And so there is a lot of amazing, profound information to share, and this is why this video will be broken into two parts. This first part will be a basic introductory information analysis of why and how it is known ahead of time through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, that the stock market will peak on July 3rd. Part 2 will explain much, much more profound information, and so when this prediction comes to pass, in my opinion, it'll be obvious that you need to watch both parts. And so let's begin with this first video here, documenting this prediction that the stock market will peak on July 3rd and then begin a crash. All right, this truly, truly amazing video that is an absolute must-watch was originally produced before June 22nd. God was pointing overwhelmingly to June 22nd, including with relevant prophetic signs that had a theme of the stock market crash, or rather the peak of the stock market before it crashes over a metaphorical waterfall. And so this was the reason why it was looked prior to June 22nd, since June 1st, in fact. Since June 1st, or maybe possibly June 2nd, it was known that June 22nd would be a very, very important date. And then that was the day that the confirmation came of the discovery of the wreckage of the Titanic sub, the Titan sub, close to the bow of the wreckage of the Titanic. That was the big news story, perhaps, of the year so far. It captivated the entire world, or at least the Western countries, probably the entire world. But anyway, it captivated millions of people. The news networks carried it nonstop. It was a major news story. And this was predicted ahead of time because it was a major prophetic sign. There is so much to say about what the significance of June 22nd is and this Titanic sub. And there will be a number of videos made on that subject coming soon. But I can't make that the subject of this video. This video, again, was produced before June 22nd, long before it was known that the sub disappeared, even, because that happened on June 18th. And this knowledge was known since the beginning of June. The point is that this Titanic sub is the sign that God was pointing to. In fact, it symbolizes a crash. It was an implosion. It was a crash of the Titanic sub, and it fell. It fell from a height as well. It fell from the surface of the ocean, or however deep it was before it imploded and then fell to the bottom of the ocean, just like the Titanic fell, which, by the way, is 13,000 feet. It's a major height. The surface of the ocean is 13,000 feet above the Titanic. All right. And so, in other words, the news of the Titanic on this date was in fact 100% confirmation that the analysis prior to June 22nd was 100% correct. It was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that God is indicating is the peak of the stock market before it crashes over the metaphorical waterfall. And how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works is on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, and that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he provides second witnesses to confirm matters is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 11, which obviously hints at the big warning of judgment that were the events on 9/11 in 2001. The Titanic sub, on the day of the news of the Titanic sub and its discovery, confirming that the sub was lost, 9 vessels were in the area. 9 search and rescue vessels were in the area searching for the sub. At the break of the news, the 9 vessels disbanded from that area of the ocean, which was 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. And it will be explained in other videos, but that is extremely relevant. The Titanic is a prophetic sign that points to the Mayflower's crossing of the Atlantic with the Pilgrims, and they anchored off the coast of Cape Cod. And so it was 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod that 9 vessels, because it's all about the ships, the Titanic, the sub, and the Mayflower. 9 vessels disbanded that were searching for the sub. So this gives us our number 9. From the 9 vessels that disbanded 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, it is in turn 11 days to July 3rd, the date it is predicted that the stock market will make its secondary peak and then begin its biggest crash in all of history. Now, the rest of this video, keep in mind, was made before June 22nd. The rest of this video is 100% relevant, valid, and correct. It simply was not known at that time when it was made that June 22nd would be a step leading to another additional 11 days to the date of the stock market peak on July 3rd. And so it's very, very important, the information that God was using to point to June 22nd. And now that you know what the sign was, the Titanic sub, and of course you have heard about that, no doubt you are curious, you should be anyway, as to how God was pointing to June 22nd, because it is obviously very important. Now, here I'm going to just read an email that I wrote. It was written in my Proton Mail account. I used to use Gmail for this sort of purpose, but I feel that it is necessary to use Proton as, from what I understand, it is a more secure email website. So we can see here that this email was composed on June 7th, 2023. This prediction was known since at least then, in other words. And this email is documenting the prediction that on Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, the S&P 500 stock market index and or The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index will make their peak highs since their lows that were made in October of 2022. After making their peak on June 22nd, 2022, these indexes will, this is a prediction, after making their peak as a prediction, that they will peak on June 22nd, these indexes will commence a stock market crash that will ultimately become the biggest crash in history. The reason this is known ahead of time is that God has communicated this through his prophetic signs and connections. In the book of Joshua, the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment after the Hebrews marched around the walls 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets for a symbolic 3 sets of 7. 3 sets of 7 days before June 22nd was the day that Joe Biden collapsed on the stage at the U.S. Air Force graduation ceremony on June 1st.
Wing, 10 shot. Mr. President, thank you for joining us today.
In Bible prophecy, the number 42 is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist's rule. 3 sets of 7 days before Biden collapsed, I should say 3 sets of 7 days before Biden collapsed, because Biden collapsed 3 sets of 7 days before June 22nd, but an additional 3 sets of 7 days before Biden collapsed was the day that Title 42 expired regarding the border wall of security. This was the day that Daniel Penny was charged with second-degree manslaughter in the death of the homeless man that had been arrested 42 times. This was also the day that Trevor Daniel Jacob pleaded guilty to intentionally crashing his airplane and lying to federal authorities in order to promote a wallet. This was also the day that a man named Jacob and was sentenced to jail for infamously cheating in a fishing tournament scandal for the prize money, and his $130,000 boat was forfeited. The name Penny, the wallet, and the prize money all hint at finance. And so Jacob is tied to Trevor Daniel Jacob, and Trevor Daniel Jacob is tied to Daniel Penny. Penny, wallet, prize money all hint at finance, and that's why they all occurred on this day of this Title 42 expiration, which is symbolic of the border wall of security. That's what it regarded, which is symbolic of the book of Joshua when the walls of security collapsed after a symbolic 3 sets of 7 and 3 sets of 7 days from these signs that occurred, by the way, on May 11th was June 1st, and the day that Joe Biden collapsed on the stage, which in turn is, or was, or is, 3 sets of 7 days before it is predicted that the stock market will begin its collapse on June 22nd. The day that Biden collapsed on the stage was 44 days after a 4-story car park collapsed in the financial district of Manhattan, right near the New York Stock Exchange, just after 4 p.m. The nearby New York Stock Exchange closes at 4 p.m. The New York City Sheriff's Department stated that 4 of its vehicles were in the car park, and also that 4 people had been taken to hospital for injuries. And that was why all of this occurred in the financial district 44 days before Joe Biden collapsed, which is 3 sets of 7 days before it is predicted that the stock market and the New York Stock Exchange in the financial district will begin its collapse on June 22nd. The historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of at the precipice of Niagara Falls since 1918, the year of the Spanish flu, moved for the first time on October 31st, 2019. It moved as a result of the wind and rain storm that generated record flooding in eastern New York and western New England. The area over which the 2 flights from Boston flew over before they crashed into the 2 towers on 9/11. In God's signs, the number 19 symbolizes God's judgment, and they symbolize 9/11. That's explained later in this video, I'm sure, in part 2. The barge moved for the first time since Spanish flu, exactly 19 weeks before the World Health Organization officially declared COVID-19 to be a pandemic. And there were a number of amazing firsts for the COVID pandemic that occurred on this date, which was March 11th, 2020. Furthermore, this barge that moved for the first time since Spanish flu connects with exactly 19 weeks to this official symbolic COVID-19 date. The number 190 is the 19th triangular number, and of course 190 hints at the number 19, and the barge moved exactly 190 weeks before June 22nd, 2023. The barge is threatening to break free and crash over Niagara Falls. This is symbolic of the stock market peaking and then crashing over a metaphorical waterfall. The next time that the Niagara barge was in the news was when it broke into 2 pieces and moved slightly again on April 4th in 2022. The date 4/4 hints at the Antichrist, the 44th president. 4/4/2022 is exactly 444 days before June 22nd, 2023. The date is predicted that the stock market will peak and then begin its crash over the metaphorical waterfall. And that is the reason why this second incident regarding this barge on or at the precipice of the Niagara Falls connects profoundly to this date, June 22nd, the date it is predicted that the stock market will peak and then begin its crash over the metaphorical waterfall. On 9/11, the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street was cracked after the towers were struck by 2 planes 17 minutes apart. The stock market on Wall Street will peak and begin its crash on June 22nd, 2023, exactly 17 months and 17 days after the all-time peak in the stock market was made on January 5th, 2022. The most central prophecy in the Bible is the 70 weeks prophecy, and exactly 70 weeks prior to the all-time peak was the day that Apple stock made a significant peak and sharply declined on September 2nd, 2020. Apple did not recover and rise above this peak until late December that year. Apple made this peak and subsequent sharp decline exactly in tandem with David Blaine's fall from 25,000 feet in the sky in his ascension stunt using helium balloons. This was predicted to occur ahead of time because Blaine was born in the Big Apple. He is compared with Harry Houdini, who is from Appleton, Wisconsin, and in Western art, the fall of man is depicted with an apple. Right? Blaine, okay, so again, this was predicted ahead of time that Apple would peak and make a significant peak on September 2nd, 2020, exactly in tandem with the fall of David Blaine. I documented that in a video ahead of time, and that is precisely what happened, and this peak that Apple made wasn't surmounted until late December that year. This was predicted to occur ahead of time because, well, I just said that, Blaine was born on the same day that the Twin Towers were officially opened, on the date 4/4 in 1973, and he famously broke the record when he held his breath underwater on the Oprah Winfrey Show for 17 minutes. It was actually 17 minutes and 4 seconds. The Twin Towers were struck 17 minutes apart. Blaine's fall from a sky-high level was symbolic of the stock market peaking and falling from a metaphorical sky-high level, which is why the stock market made its all-time peak on January 5th, 2022, exactly 70 weeks after Blaine fell from the sky, and why this is in turn 17 months and 17 days before the stock market is predicted to make its peak from the low in October of 2022 on June 22nd, 2023. So the low was made there, but it's predicted to peak on this day and begin a fall from sky-high levels, which is parallel with, or hinted at with, David Blaine's fall from sky-high levels. 17 months and 17 days, and then 70 weeks prior to June 22nd. And just for emphasis, the 17 months and 17 days is hinted at with two airplanes that hit the two towers 17 minutes apart, hence the 17 months and 17 days. Part 2, though, will explain much more regarding this connection. David Blaine fell from the sky in tandem with Apple making a significant peak and sharp decline, as was predicted ahead of time, exactly 70 weeks before the all-time, which again is from the most central prophecy in the Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. This fall from the sky and this significant peak made by Apple that was in tandem with David Blaine's fall was exactly 70 weeks before the all-time peak of the stock market. 70 weeks comes from the most central prophecy, and this 70 weeks in the prophecy is broken into 62 weeks and 7 weeks, and then a final 70th week. The 7 weeks in the prophecy is in fact symbolic of 7 times 7 years, 49 years. Blaine was born in New York City on the day that the Twin Towers officially opened on 4/4 in 1973, exactly 7 times 7 years before the barge moved after it broke into two, which hints at twin pieces, on the date 4/4 in 2022. And as explained in this email thread, both Blaine's fall and April 4th, 2022 connect profoundly to June 22nd, 2023, the predicted peak and beginning of the fall of the stock market. And so this is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit bitchute.com video channel Harris Crash Prediction, and also read the website trumpprediction.com. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. it is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.